I've found the hustle when I was young and always been money motivated. I don't remember like where the dollar amount was, but I got to this place over the last like decade or so where I've been like, I'm happy, I'm comfortable. Like, what's my next thing? So if anything, I need to worry more and like focus on slowing down and being like, this is okay. You don't have to be ultra productive all the time.
And how do you feel like that's helped shape who you are today?
That's such a good question.
What started as a college side gig to cover her rent blossomed into a real estate calling. Amanda Cox turned leasing apartments into an entrepreneurial journey that even she didn't see coming. As COO of Bellaire Multifamily, she's tackling the industry's most challenging properties. While her company tripled in size last year, she stays rooted in the trenches, wearing property uniforms and sitting face-to-face with her teams. Amanda is proving that in real estate's toughest corners, empathy and autonomy aren't just values, they're competitive advantages.
I started leasing apartments in 2008. I needed to get my $400 rent paid for. So that was the gig, that I worked a certain amount of hours around my school schedule. But I liked helping people. I just had fun doing it. But then it became like a really emotional like exchange for me a little bit later into the career.
If you break down that journey, what was the hardest?
Probably.
Okay, Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
Excited to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited that you're in Texas.
I know, yeah. It's our first stop here, but and our third podcast recording in the RV.
Nice.
So
I'm impressed. I really
pretty cool,
am.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really decked it out. We have the lights, we have the major light cameras. It's gonna film well.
Awesome.
Okay, where I'd love to start is your background, but your background in your early days. So what are some of your earliest memories of your childhood, and how do you feel like that's helped shape who you are today?
That's such a good question. Well, I had a really wholesome childhood. I was outside gardening, swimming, like playing with animals and stuff with my family. They lived in the country. And I really enjoyed it. It was a slow pace life that I think we all try to like get back to now. Inching myself there a little bit at a time when I'm not like a workaholic. Yeah.
In Texas. Okay.
Yeah. Outside of Houston.
Okay.
And I had a really good childhood. We did a lot of things together as a family. I am an only child. So I was very creative. You have to be like that whenever you don't have people to play with when you're home. But my parents were just like really great people. They raised me well. We just had good fundamentals at home, and I feel really fortunate for that. I didn't like actually spread my wings and do all the crazy stuff till after I left the house. So
The crazy stuff. Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll get into that.
That's for a different podcast.
A different podcast. Okay. What part of Texas was it? What part of the countryside?
Outside of Houston, like northeast Houston area.
Okay. And then you've been in Texas pretty much all your life?
Yeah, pretty much. I have traveled for jobs in the multifamily space. I did like lease ups in different states around other universities and stuff when I was younger, but Texas has always been my home.
Cool. What did your parents do growing up for work?
My mom was in oil and gas, which is a big Houston thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had a printing company, and he was in like the commercial printing space for a long time.
How would you describe your upbringing in terms of how involved your parents were? Were they like really strict parents? Were they really relaxed?
Very strict.
Very strict.
Yeah.
Really? How did
I would say my dad was more of a financial provider in our family, not much of like a lover. I got that from my grandfather. He was like, made me feel valued and so important, and like taught me how to stick up for myself and advocate for myself. And so I got a lot of that love from him, more like a fatherly figure, where my dad was very like corporate and working a lot. I have some memories when I was younger with him, but sometimes it's hard to know, like if I look at a picture, if like I'm recalling it or if I really do remember it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that happens to me.
Yeah. And then my mom was a super mom. I mean, she did everything. She worked, but also put me in my priorities, like all the sports and dance and all the things I wanted to do while I was growing up. She prioritized me first. And now being older and like in a position, I'm not a mom yet. I hope to be soon, but I really can like value and appreciate that so much more now, like reflecting back on the stability and just like confidence I had from having a childhood like that.
Did you you mentioned you did a lot of like extracurriculars. Was that something you wanted to do growing up? Because I know that when I was younger, I grew up in the Bay Area, in California, and it's super competitive. So the parents would basically put their kids in all these different activities for college. And there was a lot of pressure for the resume and building your application. Did you like naturally swing to like wanting to be involved in a lot of things, or was that a push from your mom?
I'm not someone that'll like join an organization and not be like, I'm going to run it. I've always been like that since I was young. I will say I've tried a couple sports where I was really excited, and then I got there and I was like, I can't do it. Like, not baseball, softball was like that for me. I sold all the candy in the neighborhood, got all my gear, I'm ready. And then I showed up and I was like, no, it's not for me.
Really?
But I was in soccer for many years. I was in dance since I was very little. I've always like had a calling to like be around people, help people. I've honed in a lot of my leadership skills, I'd say, from, being young and in environments like that too.
Were you, I assume you're an extrovert?
I am in like a public space, but I really do like more intimate conversations, and I go home and I recharge. Or like when I was driving here this morning, I was in silence. I'm like, because I exert a lot of energy whenever I'm in social environments, and then I just kind of retreat at home. So what is that when you're like half and half?
I feel like it's a extroverted introvert. I don't know. I think the honing question that I've asked myself is, where do you get your energy from, or where do you recharge? And whenever I ask the question, the extrovert introvert question, to be honest with you, almost everybody says a mix of both. So I actually don't even know if it's a good question, because like everybody, I don't know, like there's times where I can be super extroverted and I'm extroverted and enjoy it. But then there's also times where I want to be by myself and recharge. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's probably similar for you.
I think so. And I think growing up as an only child, I had a lot of time alone. And I find that like we're just over consumers as society. It's like you can always be scrolling or watching TV or doing both, or like trying to escape. And I feel like that's where you find yourself the most, when you slow down and like just take some time. It sounds kind of woo-woo, but I believe that. Like, I think we all have our own answers intuitively. It's like just taking the time and space to like get there.
It's crazy you bring that up. We were literally just talking about that, David, and the three of us last night at dinner. And we're like, it's almost like when you're the most still in your mind and you're least distracted is when you're like most clear or intuitive and understand what to do. So I definitely feel that. I think it's interesting. Like, I feel like being alone is like, you can be physically alone, but super like, still super active mentally, right? Like, for example, I feel like really being alone is like not listening to podcasts, not listening to music, and actually just like sitting there with your thoughts. Oftentimes just to distract myself, just because it's like, I don't know. I think it's hard to be alone for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I love it.
So do you enjoy, you can sit by yourself?
I can.
Yeah.
And I've found since growing in my career and like now being a business owner, I have to block time. I've made space just once a day. Either I'll like walk on my treadmill at home or like walk outside, listen to a podcast or something. And I just put space for intention. And sometimes it'll start with like a journal like you have, and I'll start writing something out, or I don't always have a prerogative for that experience. I just know I need it. I need to like be on my own, and whatever I kind of gravitate to, I always find something helpful out of it. But it takes practice, just like anything else you would like prioritize on your calendar. And I like to do it because then everyone's like, Amanda's so busy, she doesn't have time for this meeting. And I'm like, you're right, I do. If you really knew it was on the other side of my calendar, it's like, make sure you meal prep, make sure you wash the dog. Like I schedule out everything, but then I find that time where I know I can like be myself and have the space to really recharge.
What does your daily routine look like?
Well, lately it's been living out of my car and like traveling a lot.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, I really do like the travel. I live in Austin, so I go either north to Dallas to our portfolio here or go south to San Antonio. We just picked up some properties in Houston though, so that's exciting. I'll be traveling
I
there
think I
more.
saw you post about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really big year for us this last year at Bellaire Multifamily. So I'm grateful for that, even though the travel can be exhausting sometimes. But I've been prioritizing like moving my body, eating well, and then however the day kind of unfolds, if I'm on site with my teams, I'm really intentional about that. I don't want to be checking emails. I don't want to be distracted by other things. I schedule like 3 days a week where those are my call days, and then 2 where I'm very flexible. So I can start at a property. I could go, meet someone in my network. Like I just try to stay really flexible with not being so structured around calls that I don't get the time and like the face to face like I really need with my company. And we're small still right now. So like I'm really relishing in this time of making sure I'm sharing my experiences and my feedback and like the culture I want to create in this company. I get to do it myself too. It's just keeping balance of like being in the weeds and then having that higher view of like the growth and the strategy side. So
What is culture? What does the culture you look like? What does the culture you want to create look like?
very open and communicative, like a comfortable space to talk about what you think works, what you think doesn't. Being nimble. That's one thing that I kind of worked my way out of big organizations because I don't like all the red tape. I want you to feel autonomous and empowered, and you're in this role for a reason. We trust you. Make a decision. If it's right, great. If it's not, honestly, those are the ones I remember the most in my career. I'm like, oh, I won't do that again. But we just coach and we keep people in a position where we're like, we trust you. It's like I'm a cheerleader, I think, more than anything, because I know the power of being in that type of environment, especially for someone like myself that, does better in the more smaller setting, the more autonomous. Like, if you think this is right for the property, you should make that decision. That's, the culture I want for my company. I really trust my people, and they all have such important roles to the success of every level, from, like a porter cleaning the property to a COO like myself. I want to keep like that experience in my company instead of I don't know, like a suggestion email or something. Like I cringe at things like that. I want my team to feel comfortable to like pick up the phone and call me, even though that might not be the traditional like role or chain of command in the organization, but I care about my people, and I just don't know that I can trust through every layer of the organization that same experience goes all the way through. So I work on that really actively with my company and my leadership.
When you think about evolving, you mentioned you've evolved as a leader over the years, as hopefully a lot of people have. How do you think about where that evolvement has come from? Is it you reading books? Is it you just learning by doing? Like, how do you learn and evolve as a person?
I have a coach, a performance coach I've been working with for about 3 years now. I met her at, do you know Brennan Bouchard Growth Day? Does that sound familiar?
I've heard of it, yeah.
He has a bunch of people that come and join him that are professionals in like the development space, personal development. And I went to this event. It was called Growth Day. It was like a 3-day event in Austin. And it's one of those like kind of Tony Robbins, like where you're just on fire and you're like, I'm going to do all the things. Well, I met my coach there, and she was very forward with me. We went to lunch, and she was like, Amanda, I know I can help you. Like, you're telling me about what's going on. Like, I can tell that just the more you grow and unlock different levels, it's lonely. You need someone that's going to be an advocate for you, that isn't a peer, like is someone that can truly professionally guide you to master the psychology and all the things of being, growing a company and leading. So that's changed my life. Like, I'm really grateful for her. I had to stop getting my nails done if I had to. That was my choice. Like, I had to pay for one thing or another.
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful for that. And I can't advocate for it enough, that you need that no matter where you are in your life. Like, I love self-help books, but like sometimes it's not the accountability or the real human element on the other side that's like, okay, I want to see you get there. It's time to take the next step.
Yeah, I have a coach as well. And one of the things I've learned is if somebody doesn't understand your specific situation, advice can be dangerous in my opinion, right? Because people give advice based on their own experiences. And oftentimes if you're asking somebody for advice or help and they don't have context on you, your business, your company, your work ethic, your blah, 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 the advice is not going to be true to you. And I think the advantage of having a coach is in many ways they embed themselves into your company, into your life, into your lifestyle, and they really get to know you. So then when you're getting advice and they're giving you, coaching or mentoring, it's really tailored to you. And I think that's a really important nuance. And something I learned early in my career is the earlier you are, at least for me, the more I leaned on other people for my decisions. And oftentimes it would be investors or people that were, I guess, like higher status in their career, more advanced in their career. And then you would lean on them. You realize that they don't really understand your specific business or situation. Do you feel that was like, what has your relationship been like with advice? Have you always been somebody that wants to lean on other people? Have you trusted your own intuition?
I think I trust my own intuition and I make decisions pretty quickly. I'm not an overthinker, like for good or bad. I'm like, this feels right. We're going with it. So I think I feel pretty fortunate for that. But I have had some really great mentors along my career that like would make me feel higher than high and lower than low. Like they were just like people I wanted to impress, but like trusted a lot in me and poured a lot into me, frankly. Those are people I would go to for advice. But a lot of times gosh, I don't know how to say it. I don't feel like people always want to see you win either, especially if they're in a peer space. Or you're just like bolder and do things someone else wouldn't do, even though you're scared, like that's a big part of it. It's like, I'm just going for it anyway. And your people that are like that you connect with in your life, they're few and far between, I find, especially if they don't work with a coach. It's like, if you know, you know.
Exactly. Where do you think your ambition has come from?
I think I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm like an achiever.
I'm an Enneagram 3.
I've always been like that. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all out. I also can like self-deprecate on other sides of that too. Even when I was young, I burned CDs and like $10 at school. Like I've found the hustle when I was young and always been money motivated. And as I've gotten older and like, you get to a point where I guess like the degree of financial wealth and happiness like doesn't change much. Have you heard of that theory? I don't remember like where the dollar amount was, but I got to this place over the last like decade or so where I've been like, I'm happy, I'm comfortable. Like, what's my next thing? And, I found that like pouring into other people is that, more the mentoring is that, like things that are not necessarily financially driven. But I've always just want to keep going. I'm like, I don't relish in the wins long. I'm like, okay, that was great. Now what's next? So if anything, I need to worry more and like focus on slowing down and being like, this is okay. You don't have to be ultra productive all the time. But I don't know. Is that in your blood? Like, do you ever really get rid of it or...
Yeah, I don't think you do. I've talked to a lot of people about this because I really try to understand where this comes from, because I'm also type 3 Enneagram. I don't know if you've done the Myers-Briggs, but I'm ENTJ.
No idea what that is, but it sounds interesting.
It's a similar to Enneagram. And I think for me, the diagnosis that I've placed on myself is that I think there's a couple things. I think there's two things. One, I think accomplishing things for me releases a lot of dopamine. It just feels good. When you get things done, it feels good. And then I think too, on the inverse, when you're not accomplishing things, I think it feels really bad, at least for me. I think whether this is tied to my childhood or something else, I've tied a lot of my self-worth to my accomplishments. So if I'm not accomplishing something, if I'm not doing something, it's kind of like, well, like what am I doing? Or and that's come up in my mind. And I don't know where it comes from. But I feel like because of those two things, I don't know how it's going to go away unless I detangle me feeling not productive or not good about myself if I'm not doing something. Right. And I think going to your money point, I've thought about this too. Super similar. I'm living out of an RV right now. I'm like sleeping in this RV.
It's so
We're
cool.
spending like no money, really like hustling here. And like my life is not that different. I guess it's like I don't feel less happy. In some ways I feel more happy. I'm more free, and it's fun and it's exciting. So I think I've realized something similar, and I think it's dangerous, especially when you're starting a company. I think what many founders do is they're so fixated on the exit. So like whether your company sells or whether you IPO and you make all this money, but then what you realize is once you do that, you lose your purpose or your mission, and you're kind of just like purposeless. You're lost. So I think the more important thing that I optimize for is like there needs to be. Do you know who Naval Ravikant is?
No.
He's an investor and a famous person on Twitter, and he talks about there being three things where you can find like meaning. Right? There's a purpose, a business company purpose or something. There's your faith, and then there's kids. And I think you have to have one of those things, or you have to have all of those things. And if you don't have any of those things, you often feel directionless.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder too, you're talking about your childhood and like the overachiever that probably started back then. Like I have to have the grades and I have to have all the things on my resume. And that's really interesting. I think we're close in age too. I feel like it was the generation of like, you do go to college. This is what your path should look like. So I think it's interesting to meet people that are like self-exploring later. For me, I haven't always been like the ultra creative. It's like I've known this was my path, or like this is what I want to do. So I'm finding some of that like playfulness older in life that I didn't have younger because I was so serious and like I have to be the best and do all the things. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting that we connect on that.
Yeah, no, I have the same experience. I've like definitely, especially with doing a lot of the podcast stuff, I'm really like exercising like creative muscles that I didn't otherwise. And very similar to you, it was super serious. Yeah, I think when I think about my upbringing, like why am I so focused on achievement, and why do I connect my value to my output? I think it's definitely a lot to where I grew up, right? But I think also I was a middle child, or I am a middle child. So I have an older sister and a younger brother. And I think unintentionally, my grandparents lived with us when I was like 4 for like 3 years. And I obviously it wasn't intentional, but it was very clear that they favored my sister and my brother. And I think as I like try to understand how impactful the 0 to 6 or 6 to 12 can be on your child, and that's the question I asked you in the beginning.
Yeah.
Is I think it's really important to understand that. And I guess for me, there's probably something where as a kid, I might have felt like neglected and felt like I needed to prove my value. And I probably clung on to achievements and accomplishments as a form of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm a big believer that you really need to understand like why you are the way you are. But then sometimes I'm like, am I just making up this story in my head, or is it actually that? And then you also don't even know what's true and what's not true.
No, that sounds very authentic. Like hearing you talk about it, I think you're really self-aware that that's like a part of your story.
Yeah, I think it's just valuable to be self-aware, because otherwise, how do you improve? I guess it's not super clear to me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I want to talk a little bit about. Actually, before we do that, I have one more question. Did you have role models growing up?
I did. Yeah. My grandfather was one, and he was just, like I told you earlier, he was like my father figure, but he was very accomplished, very serious. I thought he was like the Superman, like on everything that he did, like everything he touched was just like perfect for me. So I like remember just getting so much strength from him, and like how he approached the world and circumstances, and just how much he poured into me too, made me feel so loved. And then my other mentors, they've really more been like business related. Like that's my only personal one that was like such an inspiration for me. Everyone else that I've found and connected with like that, I had a purpose in mind of like being where they were, gaining knowledge from them, and a professional space.
And when you say business related, are these people that you know or people that you've read about or
All people I've known.
just people you know? Yeah.
Along the journey.
Along the journey. Okay, cool. I want to talk to you about how you fell into multifamily in real estate. How did you get into real estate? Like what was that like?
That's funny how you say how you fell into it.
Yeah.
Like you didn't think I grew up choosing I wanted to run apartments?
Everybody I meet has fallen into this industry.
Yeah,
so.
it's because we do.
Yeah.
We do. I started leasing apartments in 2008. I was in college and I needed to get my $400 rent paid for. So that was the gig that I worked a certain amount of hours around my school schedule. And I would make commissions leasing to like friends and stuff. It was a student property by the bed in San Marcos. And I was really good at it. My options were like go back home to Houston after college or become a traveling like leasing manager with the owner of the company I was working for. It was a small management company. Now I recognize like the structure looking back then I didn't know what fair housing was. We had a lease on a Word document. We just change it if we wanted. Like the recklessness of the beginning of my career, it makes me cringe, like thinking about it. But I liked helping people and I really enjoyed it. I did it for like 4 years after college before I left San Marcos. And I guess it was like being a college student, like I guess not a student, but like making some money in a college town was pretty cool. It delayed my like growing up a little bit longer.
And then why did you decide to stick with it after like college? And when did you know that you wanted to make a career out of it?
I'd say within like 6 months of graduating from college, I knew that I wanted to stay in it. I didn't know exactly what the trajectory would be. I didn't know like where I wanted to go. I just knew I didn't want to go back to Houston. And then like helping friends find apartments. Then after I got out of student housing, I worked with like families and people that were bringing their baby home for the first time or like celebrating Christmas in the apartment. I just like felt very emotionally connected to helping people. It wasn't like that though in student housing. It was more of like the job and I wanted to live near my friends or like my sorority sisters. I'd like match us all in the same building. Like I just had fun doing it. But then it became like a really emotional like exchange for me a little bit later into the career.
And as you started as a leasing agent, I think from there you went to property manager to regional property manager to regional vice president to COO. If you break down that journey, what was the hardest leap?
Probably going from a property manager to a regional manager, because as a community manager on site, you do all the things. As a regional manager, you shouldn't be doing all the things. You should be guiding and coaching more than you are in the weeds. And I always thought that like my managers, if I was doing the things for them, that I was helping them. And that wasn't always the case. Sometimes I got taken advantage of. Sometimes I'd be working on Saturdays, posting invoices, thinking my manager didn't have the time to do it. So I definitely learned a lot about like that, towing that line at that point in my career. I think that was the hardest transition for me. But every one I really wasn't ready for. I just am like, I want to try, or like, put me in it. Like, I don't know that you are like confidently ready for those promotions. And we tend to promote pretty quickly in this industry too. It's like, if you have the grit and you keep showing up for the fire, flood, and blood, it's like you were made for this. So.
Yeah, I feel like, but I feel like you're never really ready, right? Like,
yeah, I don't think so. You just do it.
You just kind of do it, and then you just like become it. And like, I feel like it's a constant, especially when I'm building this company. Like, I don't know if I'm ever ready to do anything, but I just like do it and trick myself, and then somehow I like end up doing it, or I don't end up doing it. But I just like, yeah, you're never really prepared. And I think the more you lean into that discomfort, the more successful you can be in your career. Because usually what I found is discomfort is often associated with growth. So you have to do things that make you uncomfortable, because that's how you grow and that's how you push the boundaries. Because if you're comfortable, you're used to it, which means you've done it before.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think something that stood out with you, when we first talked on the phone, was I think you were at a property walking around and like in your property uniform and just like really in the weeds.
Yeah.
And I want to understand why you think that's so important, right? Because I think, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned being, it's important to like be on the ground and then also zoom out. Why is it so important for you to be on the ground and in the weeds?
So as a small company, we don't have a lot of systems or like quarterbacks, I call them. I don't have a trainer. I don't have a HR person or a talent recruitment. We wear all of those hats as leadership. So I feel like if I'm going to know the pain points, the things my team is challenged with, I need to be there and sit across from them. Like, what's broken in the system? What would you change? How can we better empower you and give you more tools in this position? Because we have some SOPs, and I don't want to downplay the structure I built, but at the same time, I've got a lot more to go. And I feel like the one-on-one time and being real live in that environment is so helpful for my teams. And then they can see how I handle an angry resident or what I do in an emergency situation. And I just think that is more valuable than any training that you could take online or in a book or something like that. So I think that's really important because I want to be a company that makes decisions based upon making the job easier for my on-site team, not what I think is best. And I've been in situations where it's been very like pushed down from the top over things that I didn't need, my teams didn't need. And so that's very frustrating for me. And I don't want to be that leader. So learning from environments I have not thrived in or had frustrations with changes has helped me to be that way. Also, my properties are very distressed. So we're not managing sexy deals. Like these are receiverships, lack of funds, squatters, vandalism. Like it's challenging. There's not a lot of management companies out there that are wanting these deals either. And so I think we're just really putting ourselves in this position of like, we are good at this. It takes a certain amount of team to do this. And, we're just taking on a lot of hard deals right now because we know that's going to help with growth, and that's the market that we're in. So I've been really lucky that like brokers, people I've worked with in the business, some large management companies that are more risk averse and can't hold on to these properties have given me referrals. So I'm really grateful for that. And I know right now, most people in this industry did not deal with the last recession. Like they don't know what that time looked like. And if your leadership's not on site asking the right questions and being face to face, your team's not going to know. And I see this like a pandemic across all of multifamily right now. It's like people that haven't been in the suck for some time, they don't get it. We just had like over a decade of like, you don't want to pay that rent, someone else will, like it was just people came to you. You didn't have to go out and find the qualified traffic. And that is not the world we're in right now, which is probably why our turnover is so high as an industry. And, it's tough. I just feel like, obviously you can tell I'm like so passionate about being on site. I'm like, that's how they're going to know.
So do you feel like, it sounds like the answer is a clear yes, but there's a significant advantage of when starting your own property management company or being a leader in the industry, having the exposure to being at the ground level and actually playing that role itself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that just being in the basics matters all the time. Like you can really boil everything down to like, what are the few functions that you're doing every day? And I talk to a lot of operators still and large management companies that have been like very tech focused, or like there's so much coming in the pipeline that the teams just get like analysis paralysis. So I'm really cautious of that. I think about like everybody that touches the process. If I'm going to change something or implement it new, like, is it people minded? And is it because of on-site? Is their day going to be better because I made that decision? And I have to be in the weeds for that.
Kobe, I can't remember. There's a podcast I listen to called Founders. It's by this guy called David Senra, and he reads a biography every week and basically sums it up in 1 hour. And he's been doing this for like 400 weeks. He has 400 plus episodes. And what's really interesting is because he has such a large Rolodex of like literal biographies of some of the most successful people in the world, one of the conclusions that he's come to is that oftentimes the best people just do the basics really, really well. So they master the fundamentals. And I think it's in some ways you're kind of saying that is like just get the basics right. When you understand the basics at the ground level, I think people are often looking for all these like nice things, and they're what I say majoring in the minors when you just really have to get the major right and focus on the fundamentals.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, I want to read a quote that I saw on one of your LinkedIn posts, and I want you to tell me what it means to you. Be a resource. Add value, help others become successful, whether it benefits you today or not. I don't know if you remember that, but it was in one of your LinkedIn posts, and I thought it was interesting. Why is that important to you?
I think that being selfless and making connections is like, I think that's everything. It's very easy to be caught up in what you're going through and what your needs are. And I think LinkedIn especially is one of the places where I've found like a lot of growth in my network. I think it's a special place for that. Different than any other like social media. So I really find that meeting people, being intentional about like, I respond to all of my messages. Sometimes I don't know if they're real people or not. Like I think AI is getting really good. But I want to be intentional with that. Like, what are you doing? Like someone reached out to me the other day looking for a job. And I was like, can I share your contact info? Send me your resume. I'm not looking, but I think I might have a contact for you. I feel a lot of joy doing that. And I don't know that connection is going to do anything for me, but maybe it'll circle back in 5 years and someone referred me for management or something. I believe like in putting it out there, and like the more that you give, the more that will come back to you. And I was inspired by, I was meeting with a gentleman that connected me to someone. He was like, I was thinking about you in this conversation. It was for a product that he was like, Amanda company needs this. He inspired me to be like, wow, I can't believe that you thought about me out of like everyone in your network, that this would be a good solution for me, and connected me with someone in his network. And I just try to like pay that forward. I'm sure it's come back around. I can't really make the ROI, but I'm like, I know that there's been opportunities where I've made a connection or someone has done and blessed me with that. And I just think that's how we should all live. Like it would be in a much nicer place if that was the case.
What was the transition like to building your own company and start, working on Bellaire?
Well, I kind of did it in the dark while I was at another company. My now business partner was one of my clients. And the management company was dismantling. Like there was a plan in place for them to break down the organization. And I told my now business partner, like, we have to find you a management company. Like, let me help you with this. Because I really cared about him as a person and the success of his assets. And he kind of courted me for a couple of months. He's like, well, why don't we do this ourselves? And I was like, oh no, I'm like, I'm in this till the end, till I'm done with this company. And I was just very loyal to that. I wanted to see it through. And I also had like a very small piece of ownership if the company was successful at the exit, which didn't end up being worth the piece of paper it was written on. But like I was so loyal to that and that opportunity as well. And so I started like researching softwares and like really meeting with people in the industry and thinking like, could I really do this? And over about maybe 5 months, I like built out a model and I shared it with my business partner now, George. And it's laughable to look back at this model now, but he reminds me all the time. He's like, that's entrepreneurship. Like you just do your best. And then it doesn't look like that at all. And then you come back to it and we refine and, we elevate. But I think he like believed in me in that moment more than I did myself. I don't think I ever would have been like, let's go start a management company. But I'm so glad that we did. And we talk about like feeling rich and what that means to us. And like I got to see my girlfriend in Denver this weekend and I flew home middle of the day yesterday. Like that is rich to me. Like I have the ability to like be so dialed in and so on what I'm working on. And then I also can take a 3-day weekend. Like I feel like on top of the world that I get to live that kind of life. So even though I am in a discomfort all the time because I'm in a role that I've never done before and I'm stretching constantly, I value that I get to have this kind of life so much. I don't think I could ever go back to working for anyone else again. But it's been really special for me. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm just committed to keep showing up. And I think I'll be successful like that.
You said George is your business partner?
Yeah, George.
How do you guys complement each other in terms of skills? And
he's been a CFO of many large organizations before. He's very financially astute and like has great guidance. So on a like business ownership side, I think he brings all of the skill as far as that's concerned. And I joke with him, like, I'm the sweat equity. Like, I'm out there making it happen. But he's a great sounding board and he really trusts me. And we fit each other really well. We've had some arguments too, that happens along the way, but he's just a very good man and a great business partner. And I think you find doing business with different people what they're like. I think it was great that we got to work together a couple years before we actually started the company, because he, knew about me and I knew about him in that respect before we decided to go all in and start Bellaire.
What's been the most like surprisingly challenging thing about like doing your own thing to you?
I would say I like this though too about the industry is that it's every day is different. I will say I like don't get surprised by often of like the things that I come across now, but as a business owner, I get surprised by things I come across all the time. And I think I feel like I've had to put some walls up over time too, of like how much I can share, how much I shouldn't, what's the right audience for that. That's been a little bit more challenging for me because I'm a giver and I like to share. Like I won't gatekeep anything. If it could help someone else, I'd love to be that person too. But I find that like it's more difficult to do that growing this business. And we've like 3X'd in size last year. So some days I'm just like, are my feet down? Like, are we making it today?
Where do you see this going in 5 years?
I think we'll be at least a 10,000 unit company. My big, bold goal this year is 6,000 units.
And where are you guys at now?
Now that I like say it out loud, I'm like, we're a little over 4,000, okay. But I want to add 6,000 units.
Oh, so you want to get to 10,000 units this year?
Well, we don't know what the back door looks like because some of my properties are receiverships from the lender. They want to get them stable and get rid of them. So I'm not looking at like how many units in total. I'm looking at how many more we could bring in because the back door is that whatever the success is for that client, they might want to sell and sad for me, I'm going to get rid of the property, but I might retain the management, or that is the goal ultimately for a lot of the lenders I'm working with. They don't want to hold these deals on their balance sheet. So
to add 6,000 units in 1 year, what do you think is going to break? And what is going to break along the way?
Probably some systems like that we just stretch too much. We need some more infrastructure for this as well and silo some positions like that. Between about 5,000 units to 10,000, you go through a lot of foundational changes from what I've experienced being a part of this with another company. I think I shared with you, I was with Roscoe Properties, RPM now, from about 4,000 units to like over 100,000. I was blessed to be with that organization, working directly with the leadership and seeing like the decisions they made, like when they brought in a trainer, when they brought in like their own payroll in-house. And I really like relished in that and took a lot of notes of like the right way to do it. So I can tell like things are going to break in that respect. Like I can only push so much of the people that we have until it's like, okay, this just doesn't make sense to be on this person anymore. Or it's time to bring in a third party, or maybe we look for that talent in-house. I can tell you our Entrada system, our property management software, this is a place I'm starting to find a break as we've brought on so many new team members. I need like a help desk because right now it's myself or my VP behind the emails, resetting passwords and assigning trainings. And that's not the best use of our time, but we've made it till this point until we're like, okay, now we're ready to do that. And through that process, we'll be able to identify training needs and other things that we're just not able to track right now because it's not on like a ticketing system. So that's just an example of something from like 0 units to 4,000 we're breaking at this point.
So I guess that's a good segue. I want to understand, you've been in this industry for a while. AI in many industries is helping businesses scale much more efficiently and effectively. From your perspective, what do you feel like AI is solving most effectively in this industry? Like what are the best use cases? And then what do you think are the underrepresented use cases for AI?
Sure, that's a great question. I think data entry has been really helpful. Like, I don't need someone scanning and GL coding an invoice. We can use AI for that. Also, the being on 24 hours, like having a bot on our website that can interact, set up a tour. I'm amazed at how great these interactions are. Very different from, a year, 2 years ago when we started talking about these types of services. I don't think I've tapped in enough. Like, I definitely think there's opportunity within my company to add in more resources on the AI side. I've been telling you, like, I'm back to basics. I'm like, make sure you check your guest card, follow up 5 times. Our system, we have a CRM within Entrada, but it's like, I tell my teams, if you don't pick up the phone, it wasn't a follow-up. Like, you got to get them on the phone. So I think I could better use some of these systems. Really, the biggest two I can think of is support for leasing outside of business hours, and then data processing is where we've hit so far.
Okay, that's really interesting because on the tech side for tech companies, people like to talk about how there are going to be in the future single employee $1 billion companies, because so much of what tech companies do today is going to be fully automated by AI. When you think about like property management, right now I feel like we're at a place, like you talked about leasing, where one of the things we have an AI leasing product, right? And one of the things that we really focus on is we found it very frustrating when a conversation gets stuck and then the AI product has to pass it back to a human leasing agent. And I'm of the belief that I don't think the role can be fully automated. I think the human part of leasing and doing the tour and building rapport has a heavy influence on whether somebody is going to rent or not. I mean, I just leased an apartment and I did maybe 15 tours, and obviously the place matters most, but also like, are you going to be interacting with a property manager that is reliable, that is trustworthy, and
Right.
all that? So that was an influence on my decision. Do you feel like we're going to get to a place where like full roles are going to be automated by AI?
I think maybe the assistant manager position, like someone that's going to send out a renewal, that's going to collect a rent. I think a lot of that could be fully turned to an AI position. I don't think the human touch will ever come out of this business, though. I think it's always going to be there. It's such a need. But COVID really stretched some of our roles. We thought like we would either social distance or take people off of the site level. In larger organizations, I was a part of doing some central support teams. So I think like that's already, those wheels are turning or like fully automated in some larger organizations. Wouldn't make sense for me at my size of a company, but definitely worth consideration and has been done and successfully. I just don't see anyone. I don't know. I just feel like I don't have like a way to explain it. I just don't think you can take the human out of this business.
Totally. I totally agree. And I think that's the cool thing about at least our thesis on AI is that like there just needs to be all the boring tasks like data entry and answering the same questions over and over again are going to be automated and should be automated. But the energy generating activities like interacting with people, building a connection, all of that should and continue to be done by humans. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so draining, right? Just to do the same thing over and over again is draining. I think humans in general should be focused on more of the human task. So I'm also in that belief.
Yeah, more resident events.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
More wind down Wednesdays.
Wind down Wednesdays.
Well, and I think statistically, people stay in a community where they feel like it's a community. So that might not be something you experience when you're touring for the first time, but think about somewhere you would go because someone referred you or they live there already and had a great experience. That's like a vibe you can't get through digital.
Do you feel like community is a strong enough retention like mechanism for a resident? Like you're kind of saying it, but do you think somebody will truly stay at an apartment because they've built a community?
Yeah, if their maintenance requests get done.
Yeah, their maintenance requests get done.
Like everyone loves the maintenance, you know, they don't send out lease violations like the office does. They come and fix your thing. So I think that that's really critical. It's like the upkeep and mechanics of a property, because if you have a bad experience in that respect, like you just can't get over it. I have people that have lived at a property 5 years. They're like, remember in 1990 when the gate broke? And I'm like, I can't fix that, you know, like let's move on. Yeah. But I think that's in really great experiences as well as really poor experiences for people. So we like to say like that renewal starts on the first day. I think some of the systems that help with surveying and the warm touches throughout the lease cycle help too, but I absolutely would renew if I like loved the people around me and my lifestyle hadn't changed. Like I probably would stay for some time.
Totally. Well, awesome. Amanda, I think that's a good place to end.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the experience and the conversation.
This is very cool. I'm so excited to follow your journey through all the states you go to and all the people that you meet with along the way. This is such a unique thing. I'm just like, I can't cheerlead you enough in this team. Like, this is really cool. So
I appreciate it.
Wish you guys the best through all of it. And hopefully you eat some good like Tex-Mex while you're here.
Yeah, we still haven't had barbecue, so we need to do that.
Okay, do that when you go to Austin.
We're going to go to Terry Black's. Is that it? Is that on?
It's okay. I do have a pro tip for you.
Okay. Well, will you be in Austin next week?
Yes. So my balcony is right over Franklin's barbecue. What most people don't know is like you can order and go pick it up. If you want to tailgate, sit outside, all of that, which is a vibe, supposedly, not me. I always like came right when my number was about to be called. You can go up directly to the window and like get some food to go. So I recommend that.
We'll take you up on that.
Yeah. And there you could park this van in the parking lot right in front of it if you go on a weekend, because it's a bank. So maybe try on a Sunday.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the barbecue's great. Anything you want to know food wise about Austin, you can hit me up. Thank you.